everyone. Welcome back. So, you can tell I'm chipper, and that's because we have a very special announcement coming, courtesy of our beloved co-host, Kibby McMahon. And it relates to our episode today, which is cutting down or completely stopping alcohol use. So, Kibby and I have both, well, I've been cutting down, she's quit drinking over the past couple of months, so we'll talk a bit about that. And Kibby also read a really helpful book that talks about cutting down alcohol from a relational perspective. So how can family and friends help? How are we impacted by family and friends? Basically, like, how does this work in a community or system? So, Kibby, why have you stopped drinking?
Well, Jacqueline, is because I'm pregnant.
What?
Yeah. So, for all the people out there who have followed my kind of up and down journey to this point, through infertility, through divorce, getting a new partner, being 36 and going through all of that, I am now pregnant, and we're super, super excited, very surprised because, just with everything I've been through, I was just very pessimistic about how this would turn out, being able to get pregnant at all. And it kind of just goes to show you, like, how much this stuff can't be planned and turns out in ways that you never expected. So, yeah.
Well, we are going to do an entire episode on this, so I don't want to... I feel like I don't want to spill all the good stuff now, but we're all very happy for you. Of course, I've known for a while now, but yeah, Kibby's last drinking experience was at my proposal, and her last shebang before a little baby pops out, it will be my wedding, because she is coming 1 week before the flight deadline. So basically, your pregnancy is all about me.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I remember being on your engagement party extravaganza. We were in Napa, and I was like downing glasses of wine, and I remember thinking, I think I'm late. I feel different. Why is that? So that is my last hurrah before my sobriety.
Sorry for having you marinate your tiny embryo in wine for my proposal.
It's okay. I'll make him strong,
Yeah. Oh, and it's a boy.
Yay!
You heard the little hand there. Yeah. Okay, so Kibby, how has the last 19 weeks of no drinking been? Obviously, we stopped drinking for very different reasons. So I imagine that has impacted our respective experiences.
Yeah, it's been hard. As soon as you get the good news about getting pregnant, you have to cut out a lot of things you love. I can't do hot tubs, sushi, massages. I didn't know that was off the table, literally. And I was just, especially in the pandemic, I got into this big habit that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, but just kind of a lot of substances. I was drinking a lot of caffeine in the morning. I'm prescribed medications for ADHD, so taking that during the day. And then instead of going home from the office, my going home was sitting on the couch and having a glass of wine to mark like the end of a work day. So all of that had to go away like within one day to the next. And that was just it's really tough because you don't know how much these substances like alcohol are just part of your day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I quit, and when I say quit, I don't really mean quit. I took a month where I was supposed to not drink alcohol. I failed at that experiment, but I still think there were a lot of successes within the experiment. The times I drank, there were 2 times, and then I kind of ended a few days early. They were pretty intentional. One was Valentine's Day, and one was a celebration of my PhD milestone. But I think knowing that I was doing it for myself, that I had my own reasons for it, it wasn't like forced on me, really helped with motivation. Of course, though, it also meant that I was more liable to fuck up because there wasn't a baby I was trying to keep safe. Have you been enjoying the no drinking thing at all? She's like, no.
Yeah, I just had to really struggle to think of the positives in that moment. Yeah, I mean, of course, and we'll talk about, substance abuse from this perspective, but it just really, it's like the reasons why you drink or don't drink really make a difference, right? Like, not drinking, thinking that it's good for like your child versus just like your health. But I mean, I really have enjoyed having a really good social reason why I don't drink, right? Like if I were to do what you did and just say, oh, I'm not drinking, I would have a really hard time really saying no and not getting a lot more questions. As soon as I say I'm pregnant, people give me that pass. So yeah, in general, I've just felt physically better, more energy, feeling more hydrated. And I don't necessarily feel like I have to have this like crutch in these certain moments of, when do I mark to myself that I'm off work, or when I'm hanging out with a friend or something like that. It just felt a little freeing in that way, but it's definitely taught me a lot about, especially because you and I have had, many times where we talked about our family members with substance abuse and alcoholism. And I think we think of ourselves very differently from them. We don't have like really huge problems like that, but it's still, I don't know, it gives a little insight to like what it's like to quit something that you have come to rely on.
Yeah, I think so. My sister has severe alcoholism, and we've talked about this. I haven't named her as my sister, but we talked about that on this podcast a lot. And she's in recovery. She hasn't had a drink in like eight months or something like that. But yeah, I mean, compared to her, it's night and day. But I still drink heavily. And I think it was interesting because when I decided to do the month, before I had decided to do the month, it had seemed kind of inconceivable that I could go weeks and weeks without alcohol, which is a concerning thing to have to say. But it was just so embedded into my culture. Like when I visit home, we all drink together except for my sister. Paul and I drink a lot. It's part of every social event. I'm a very social person. I mean, New York City, it's like what you do there every day. It's like a new happy hour and a new party. And so I got concerned that being without alcohol felt like a totally different lifestyle. And I wanted to see how dependent on that I really was. It was also causing arguments with Paul and me, like causing fighting, and that was the main impetus for cooling it. But yeah, I think there's a big kind of gradient of reasons for why you might want to question your relationship with alcohol. There's my sister and your mom at the extreme end, and then, I don't know, I'm somewhere in the middle, perhaps. Yeah,
and I'm just hearing over and over from people we see in our clinic and things like that, and friends, that people have really increased drinking over COVID, right? There was just nothing else to do except for sit home and watch a ton of Netflix and drink. And some people have made the transition out of that, but some still struggle with that. So I think this episode is, and what you did, what we're doing of cutting down, could hopefully give some tips to people.
Yeah. I will say, I think there are some advantages also to my reasons, because getting pregnant and that being the reason you stop drinking, that coincides with feeling like shit, like being tired all the time, being nauseated all the time. So one of the biggest rewards I experienced pretty immediately was feeling healthier and better. And I imagine that wasn't as available to you.
Right.
I know your first trimester was rough.
Yeah, cutting out everything. I just didn't know what was what. I was sleeping all day. It was terrible. So, yeah, you probably got a lot of clear benefits of what cutting out drinking was doing versus me that had a mixture of body changes. So it was kind of hard for me to pinpoint like the benefits versus drawbacks. So
yeah. So what are some tips? How do we go about this if we want to cut down drinking?
Yeah, I really recommend people to read this book that I just finished, Beyond Addiction, How Science and Kindness Help People Change. It's by Dr. Jeffrey Foote, Carrie Wilkins, Nicole Kosank, and Stephanie Higgs. I really love this book because it actually, I think really changed the way I saw substance use and how family and friends, like loved ones, could actually help. It's based on, it really takes the principles of the therapy that they developed called, the acronym is CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training. And it really takes substance use in the context of family, friends, and community and work. Kind of like what we talk about all the time, that when people suffer from a disorder, it's not in a vacuum. Like, they're suffering because of problems in the environment or reinforcement or just like things about their relationships, right? And vice versa, people in a person's life can help them change. And I found a lot of hope reading it, because I've always thought of, treating alcoholism or substance use in a very kind of old school way of, you got to wait till the person hits rock bottom. There's nothing you can do to change a person. They have to want to. So you just have to just watch them hit rock bottom helplessly and hope for the best. Yeah. But this book is like, no, there are things that you can do at any stage of watching a person struggle with alcoholism. And they just break it down to a couple simple principles. We'll go into detail on them, but the main idea is to give these people, your loved ones who are drinking maybe too much, a choice, like give them agency, and also reinforcement for changing this behavior. So if like you're going to take anything out of this, a podcast, the thing that you can do for your loved one is to introduce competition for the substance use. So that means like constructive activities that serve the same needs as a substance. So whatever that person is doing, like drinking for, or like why are they drinking, introducing something that's more healthy that basically can take the place of that drinking or substance use, but serve the same needs, right? So if it's like they need to relax, they need to have fun, they need to bond, like introduce something else to replace that. So that's like the main tip, but there's like a whole bunch of other tips that we'll get into. So yeah.
It sounds like that from that it's really important to understand what need alcohol is fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually thought before my month that it was fulfilling more needs than it actually was. I thought I needed it to de-stress, to relax, and it is nice for that sometimes, but I didn't find it difficult at all during that month to go without. The times that were specifically most difficult for me were group social experiences.
Ooh.
Where I started wondering, like, am I as extroverted as I think I am? And I think in many ways, yes. But to this day, I just, when I go to a group social outing, a lot of the time I get there and I'm like, this looks exhausting. I don't know if I really want to be here. And then I go for a drink because I know that that's going to like wake up my extroversion in a way. Allow me to be this funny, charming person. And I think so I had a lot of conversations with people on Instagram about this, and a lot of people were repeating that same kind of idea. It's like, it was so powerful quitting drinking because I realized that I'm a funny, charming person without alcohol. Like, I never needed that.
Yeah.
But I was relying on it. Like, I didn't feel like I could access that unless I drank.
Ooh, so I'm excited to do this like behavioral analysis where we kind of like.
Oh, okay.
No, because I'm hearing even as you're talking, like your experience taught you about why you're drinking, right? And that's so important to know, like what you can do to help yourself or other people. Is like even just those insights of like, oh wait, the moments where you have urges to go drink. Normally you wouldn't even think about it. A drink will already be in your hand, but that sobriety gave you that moment of pause of like, oh. That's why I'm going for it. I mean, what you did, technically what I'm doing by default is called sobriety sampling. So this approach is really cool. It's basically saying it's okay to take a specific amount of time, like a month or a week or 9 months, to not drink, because then it teaches you that abstinence can be doable. Like, it's not this death sentence of you can never drink again. You're like an addict, you can never drink again. But you could actually gain a lot from just like a really defined period of not drinking. So you've been actually saying it as we've been talking, you treat it as an experiment, right? So you gather data of what works, what doesn't work, what to do next, why are you drinking, when do you have urges, right? So we can kind of like pull all of the insights that you got from your sobriety sampling. So
Yeah, when my sister was quitting drinking, it was very hard for her to tell herself that she was never going to drink again.
Yeah.
And she is that kind of alcoholic. She just can't drink again.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if that happens a lot with addicts when they're first going through recovery, just thinking like saying forever is way too big of a word. And then, she did things like she'd bring in alcohol a little bit to test, like, oh, what if it's just about my triggers? Like, if those are removed, can I drink again? And that didn't work. But I think she's gotten to a point now where it's okay to say forever. But for a while, that sampling tool was all she could conceive of. I think for us, where it's not so life or death, taking a month and doing it is like, I was actually really excited the first few days. Paul was going to do it with me. That didn't happen. But he was going to do it with me. So I woke up. It's like, this is going to be a different month. It's going to be fun. It's going to be new. It's like almost a novel experience. And yeah, I enjoyed it for the most part, I would say. And it definitely felt doable doing it in a chunk than saying, I don't know when I'm ever going to drink again, if ever.
Yeah, that's a tip for yourself or your loved one is there is such a, there are circumstances where someone can't drink again, but it makes it feel less black and white. It makes it feel less like, oh, I'm quitting drinking, and then if you have a drink, you're automatically a failure. Like you said, like, I failed. Like, no, if you treat it as like a time to really learn about yourself, it makes it way less, you take the pressure off,
Right.
So what I'd love to do this with you, just because if you are yourself, going to do a sobriety sampling, or you're going to help a friend, a loved one do it, there are ways to there are questions to ask yourself to kind of learn about your drinking and why you drink. And when I say drinking, I also mean like any kind of substances. So this is called the behavioral analysis. This is really common in cognitive behavioral therapies, where you have like a problem behavior you want to change, or like a pattern you want to change, but the first step is to gain insight on why you're doing it, what are the consequences. So the common pieces of behavioral analysis is really identifying what the problem behavior is, like, I drink too much, but like specifically, how many times do you drink, what happens when you drink, blah blah blah. And then triggers and consequences. Triggers are the things that happen before that lead to drinking, and consequences are all the things that happen after, right? Super simple. It's like behavioral analysis, looking at the chain of events that happen. So, all right, for you, I'll ask you, what was your problem behavior when you define, the moment where you're like, oh, I'm drinking too much, I want to cut down. Like, how much were you actually drinking?
I don't know if I should admit that on here.
Say generally. In therapy, we could get more specific.
Rather high tolerance. I think it was the frequency, and it would lead... So I sleep really poorly, and so alcohol would really interfere with that. And so I would always have... I don't even know if they were properly called hangovers, but I would just feel really terrible the next day because it was just total lack of sleep. Like really poor quality sleep. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was
it.
That was the problem behavior. Just like being basically hungover a lot, and then fighting with Paul. Those were the two big ones. Okay.
Yep. Actually, we'll put those in. We'll get to those as consequences, because it seems like frequent drinking was like the behavior. Okay. And then let's look at the triggers. So external triggers, like who would you usually be with when you drank? Where do you usually drink, and like when? Like what situations would you drink?
Yeah, I was gonna say the people I usually drink with are like literally everybody I know.
Oh, good. Right, so everyone's a trigger.
Well, no, it's just like Paul and I are very social. I would say the thing that became really frequent over the past few years are having a group of people over to our house. Paul would immediately start making cocktails for everyone. Which is a high alcohol content drink, and it would go from there.
Okay, great. And then, what were you in those moments? Let's say you're in, you have a group of people making drinks, especially with your partner involved. What were you thinking or feeling right before you would take a drink?
Um, I think a lot of different things. Sometimes it would be excitement, like, yay. But I think a lot of times it was like, okay, we're doing this again. Well, just start drinking because otherwise I'm going to be too tired to get through this.
Okay, so you would feel a little bit of, I mean, you kind of mentioned this earlier, describing like what you learned when you cut out drinking. So it's almost kind of like, what is it? A dread about the demands of the social interactions, or okay, so it's feeling kind of like tired or dreading it, or anxiety, would you say, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was like so I'm not really a group person so much. I like
okay.
one-on-one. I prefer one-on-one time.
Yeah.
But I also like occasional group stuff is great. But I do find it taxing, and I find that like the navigation into the more personal, deeper conversations I can definitely do, but I can do it much more easily if I'm drinking. So like the small talk stuff. It's not that I hate small talk, but it's just like, I don't know. It's just a managing of different relationships until it can get to like an easy place.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really interesting internal trigger, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. I definitely do. It's like, it's like the dread of the social interaction how much emotional drain and taxing it would take to get to the place that you like, which is like the one-on-one deeper conversations with people.
Exactly.
And those are like the internal triggers of drinking. That's awesome. Okay. So you're in that party. Paul's like making his delicious cocktails. He's very good at that. And you're like, oh my God, there's all these people around in your living room, probably including me. We're going to do small talk, but I really want to get to the good stuff, the good conversations. Okay. So let's say you have a couple of drinks. This is looking at the short-term positive consequences. Maybe the like kind of the reasons why you drink. What's reinforcing about it? What do you like about the people you drink with, the way you feel, about the time of day? Like what are the immediate positive impacts of you drinking in that moment, in that setting?
There are just so many. I like that I can almost instantly trust my personality. I feel on. I feel like it's not going to be hard to ask people questions. Like questions just come to my mind much faster. I don't fear awkward silences. So it's not that I have social anxiety or anything like that. It's almost like more of a tiredness, like a and all of that just goes by really quickly. I feel really confident and socially competent when I drink. And then what I like about other people that drink is they're fun. They can ease into a really great conversation with fluidly, I suppose.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do stupid, funny things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so actually this all kind of, the short-term positive consequences is really like a social lubricant. It really gets you
100%.
to a good place where you can communicate and connect to people easily, and vice versa with the other people. So actually, like, social connection is your reinforcer.
There's also just an instant mood boost.
Yeah. So you feel like the happy or like excited or maybe more interested. I'm just guessing. All right. What are you were already saying it, long-term negative consequences, the crappy stuff that happens as a result of that?
Feeling
drinking.
Sluggish all the time, feeling like I'm only working at 60% capacity, sometimes 20%, and relationship problems with Paul.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so that's perfect. That's basically the whole behavioral analysis. So now I'm understanding.
And weight gain.
Oh, wait, yeah, that's a long-term negative consequence to your health in general, right? Sleep, weight gain, relational problems, energy. So we're getting like a bigger scope, right? And this is something you do for yourself, but also for, if you're just sitting there thinking about your loved one, it's almost like kind of an insight tool for yourself or others. It's like, okay, instead of just saying, ugh, they drink so much, it's like, why? Why do they drink? Like, of course, knowing you're so social, you love relationships. And it makes total sense why anything that would help you connect to people would be something that's super reinforcing, and why you would drink more in those scenarios.
It's funny because I don't need it with patients. Like, I remember before I ever had a patient, I was like, how am I going to get through an entire day of talking to patients? Like, on the one hand, it's my dream job, but on the other hand, I don't get to talk very much about myself. Like, it's going to be really exhausting, and I don't find that at all. And I think it's because you slip into the depth very quickly in that hour. It's one-on-one. There's no small talk really. You just get into it, and it becomes interesting really quickly, and you have an implicit permission to ask hard questions or ask probing questions. Not for every single patient. You have to gain, trust, but there's an expectation your therapist is going to ask you personal questions, versus it's just a different thing you have to navigate with friends or acquaintances.
No, that's so perfect, because that's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking, because the principle that I'll talk about in a minute is when you're trying to help yourself like wean off of alcohol or stop drinking, it's like what can give you those short-term positive consequences without drinking, right? And you were like, oh, I want to get into a deep conversation. I want to do it one-on-one. I want to be confident and be able to like ask them interesting questions. And I was thinking like, that's probably why you love doing therapy, because it gives you that social context where that's all appropriate and expected, right? So you can kind of see what they mean by giving an alternative or a competing activity that gives the same benefits as drinking, but it doesn't have to involve drinking.
Yeah. I think one thing that I learned from the month is that it might be possible that if I really cut down on drinking, my life would change a lot, because you have two choices. Like, either you keep doing these group events and you just do it without alcohol and you learn to rely on yourself in a different way, which is great. But I also just had a lack of interest in those things. And it's not that I was anhedonic overall. I woke up really excited about hobbies, about gardening, about being outside. It was just much more introverted. And I still love seeing patients. So I think I got a lot of that joy, like a lot of that need fulfilled by patients, and then by seeing like some very specific people. So that's why I said at the beginning, maybe I'm not as extroverted as I think I am. Some of these things, I just wonder if alcohol is like keeping me connected to an interest that isn't as important to me anymore. Like back when I was in New York, searching for a husband, searching for a career, like networking, all of that, it was for a bigger purpose. Yeah. And I don't have that as much anymore. Yeah. I mean, this is exactly it, that we don't just do substances or drink in a vacuum. It takes this, it's like one cog in the machine, right? And if you're shifting the reinforcers for you, then maybe you shift like why you drink. And you do, I mean, to be fair, you do have a lot of situations where you guys invite people over, and all that situation where you tend to drink happens for you a lot, right? Yeah. But it may be different ones than when you're like going out on dates in New York. Yeah. When my sister, I remember I told her, she was very amused that I was doing this month. And it was nice because she was very non-judgmental when I said I didn't actually do the month. And I told her about the occasions when I drink, and she's like, yeah, the thing about not drinking is that to do it for just 1 month will give you certain benefits, but it really takes, and I've heard this over and over again, it takes like 3 months to build new habits. And so she had to relearn how to entertain herself. And she said after 3 months, she realized that she's actually quite entertained without alcohol. It's just that she discovered new interests, she discovered new people to be with, right. Yeah. And she gained a new comfort with herself. Very cool. And I didn't have that in like the first time I drank was after a week of not drinking, you know what I mean? Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're in grad school, and there's not a lot of like, picking up new hobbies right now. You're like deep into writing your master's paper, so I'm sure it's less reinforcing to be sober in the scenario, but
it's okay. I just stare at my fruit trees all day.
So I'll list out a couple of the the key strategies that you can use to help your loved one cut down on drinking. You can apply it to yourself, but I really love these sections because it gave me a lot of hope. If you're around someone that's struggling with alcohol, and we're talking about alcoholism, but we can be talking about what we were going through, was just someone who just wants to cut down, right? Someone who, and it's hard because if you're a friend, it's like, what do? Do you like keep them on track? Do you like, shame them when they drink, or do you like, what do you do to support someone? So these kind of gives like some cute little tips for that. Not cute, very important, but the number one, I really recommend people to get this book, the Beyond Addiction, How Science and Kindness Help People Change. But the first one they talk about is something that we talk about all the time, which is to help yourself, like take self-care first. This is so important, and I never really thought about it in this way, but if you are focused on your partner or friend or other family member who's drinking too much, you might get to the point where that's something that you're fixating on and really losing focus on what helps you in the rest of your life. Like, people start to narrow their lives and the relationship. It becomes all about that. You're focused on, like, are they drinking? Are they not? Or you're getting angry. And then every conversation you have about it is just filled with judgment and old pains. So in order to even help that person, if you're in that kind of resentful situation, is to like make sure that you're setting your limits, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, going to therapy, and living a fulfilling life on your own. Like, really thinking, like, how is my relationship with this person outside of the drinking? Is it really all about drinking, or is it about how the drinking like has narrowed everything to that problem? So I think it's just like, take a step back, take care of yourself, validate your feelings. Huge step that you can't really skip, because you're just setting yourself up for failure if you just go in barreling with all of your resentments. Yeah. So, I mean, we've both been there. We've both been in a situation where we're like, oh, I know what to do to help my loved one stop. I'll yell at them when they're drinking. Does not help.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
It does not.
And that might seem obvious, but it's so infuriating when you when you are related to an alcoholic. It's hard not to be judgmental and shaming.
Yeah, because every time we yell at them, it actually backfires. They went through some research showing that it does, because then their act of drinking or not drinking is like giving into some demands that other people made of them, right? It's not giving them the choice. And if you get into these fights, you're yelling at them while they're drinking, and then you're probably mad when they're not drinking. So you're not actually connecting your anger to their drinking behavior. They're just going to be like, well, they're mad anyway, so I might as well just have a good time and have a drink, right? Yeah. So it really backfires.
Also, it might feed into the trigger for drinking in the first place. Like, my sister drank because her husband was abusive and neglectful and controlling, and I mean, it was remarkable when they got divorced. Like, so much of the drinking just cleared up. But yelling and making demands and all of that was just like, it was making her feel the way she felt with him, and then it made more likely that she would drink. But it's so hard when you're in a position where your anger has nowhere to go because you want to direct it at that person. That's who you're angry at, but you can't. Yeah. Because it's going to backfire. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, that's why you have to take care of yourself first.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's yeah, you can't skip over that. You can't jump into the next two suggestions, which are actually what to do to help them change. But this is the juicy part. So the first one is reinforcement. I mean, we talk about this in CBT all the time, that people do things for a reason. Like, all animals do things. You want your dog to sit, you give them a treat, right? When they sit. And the principle is this: if a behavior is happening more often, it's being reinforced. So if someone's drinking a lot, it's being reinforced, right? There's that short-term benefit. So figuring out what that is, what that benefit is, and then giving them a replacement activity. So for you, like, now I know that you know, it's all about this, like, you know, connection to people. As your friend, I would have suggested that you and I go, you know, do a lot more one-on-one hangouts, or like we would, maybe instead of having that big, kind of party atmosphere at your house, we'll hang out with one person and I don't know, maybe do some games that, like the 36 questions that lead to love, like just something that like really facilitates that deeper conversation without having to like socially lubricate with some alcohol. So what do you think about that? What else would have helped?
I think positively about that. I mean, when I wasn't drinking, you were one of the only people I had interest in hanging out with. I mean, one simple reason was because you weren't drinking either, but also because I don't feel like it's work to talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Aw. Well, it's work now, literally, but oh, that's nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's just easy, like alcohol isn't really necessary. And it's not like other people are just naturally more exhausting. I mean, sometimes that's true, but it just might be that the relationship needs to be closer in order for it to not feel like work. So yeah, I get very excited about like one-on-one dinners, one-on-one drinks, just like that. That was one reason I love New York City so much. I was one-on-one with people almost every day. But yeah, so a lot of people on Instagram suggested mocktails as being really important. And I kind of poo-pooed that at first because I always just drink water. Like I've never water and alcohol. Those are my two drinks. And then I realized like once I did that month, how much I wanted to drink kombucha. So I think there was actually a need there that I didn't realize, which was like, yeah, sort of a treat that you're giving yourself. And so mocktails and kombucha and tea can fill that gap too.
Yeah, you're making a really good point. That's actually one of the bigger things that I've used to help me take the sting away from not drinking. The reinforcement for me is like the thought I'm doing something healthy for my baby, but I didn't realize how much like I just it feels like a fun when you have dinner and then you have like this fun little cocktail with like berries in it or like some muddled something and it's sweet and fun, like just kind of getting that boost of like sugar and a mark of like I'm partying, right? So that's something that I've used mocktails for. And in terms of what I used to use it for is like a marker of going from work to my downtime. Now I do tea, or I make a kind of my own mocktail where it's like I'm gonna have this as my evening drink, right? So it serves the purpose without the alcohol. Yeah. So you could do that for a friend, and they gave really cute examples of making sure that you reinforce the behavior that you want. So if the person is not drinking, spending more time with them, making a dinner for them, right? Like taking, going out to dinner and having one-on-one, right? Doing something special really specifically when that person doesn't drink. And you want to add some more reinforcement, which can be expressions of love, expressions of care. It could be as subtle as like, oh, I love spending time with you like this, right? And you can imply that, it's when they're not drinking, right? It's so nice that we have the energy to go on this hike, right? Or I love you so much. This is so fun. We haven't been able to do this in so long, right? So just like, it could be adding some like verbal or kind of any kind of like positive communication to really bolster how reinforcing that alternative behavior is.
I think this naturally plays into why it is so incredibly helpful when somebody else quits drinking with you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something my sister never had. Her husband just flat out would not get rid of the alcohol. And so she was all alone in doing this. And that's not very rewarding because then nothing in your culture changes. The way you entertain yourself is still through drinking. There's people drinking all around you constantly. So just in that, like rewarding them when they're doing the thing you really want, what was so helpful is when Paul started this experiment. I will say he did cut down dramatically over the month. It's just that he didn't cut out completely. What was so rewarding at first was like, suddenly we had all these sober things to do together that we just normally wouldn't do because drinking was more rewarding. But having like all these hours in the day to like pick up new hobbies or do things together, like that was being rewarded for not drinking. And it's harder to do that if somebody it's not certainly not impossible if somebody doesn't do this with you. But I think one really like easy thing you can do is hang out with that friend. You don't drink either, and then you can discover things that were kind of inaccessible to you if you're hungover all the time or you're just waiting to have fun to drink. Yeah.
It's kind of like what you said with your sister, get into new hobbies and really engage in different parts of your life. She was like probably doing this on her own, but replacing the drinking behavior with other things that would serve that purpose, right? Like if novelty and excitement is the thing, then you do something new. Or if it's connecting to others, which it sounds like for both you and Paul, that's the thing. You love connecting to others. So like finding ways to connect doesn't involve drinking. And then being like, oh my God, isn't it fun that we got to buy more trees together when we're sober? Like, maybe give him a little kiss or be a little extra affectionate. And then not when he's drinking.
Paul told me that he hugged and kissed the dying grapefruit tree yesterday.
Oh,
happy. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you listen to like recovered alcoholics talk about their new life, they often are like, I have so much more fun than I did before. I hang out with other sober people and we just have a blast. Like we do a bunch of stuff that people who drink don't do. And it's super rewarding. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what she's finding too. Like none of her friends drink. They're all from AA together. And they all just do fun stuff all the time. Yeah.
And that's just the same principle, just making it a competing activity. But I will added some caveats what they mentioned in the book that I didn't really think about. But one is if you're doing this for a loved one, first of all, make sure that, really write out this behavioral analysis in the perspective of your loved one. Like, what would be the benefits for them? What would be reinforcing for them? What are the negative consequences that they see, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you just add in activities that you think are awesome and that they don't care about, then it's like, that's not really that reinforcing. Like, I'm sure that if you're trying to have Paul cut down on his drinking, like taking him out shopping for the plants that you love, like I'm sure the social interaction like connecting to you would be reinforcing, but I don't know if that's something that would really hit for him. So like make sure that it's something that they like, and it's even better if you do that activity at the same time and context that person normally would drink. So if your Friday nights were usually filled with those parties where you would be making drinks, well, instead on Friday nights you go out with one friend and do something fun alone, one-on-one, right? So that's the kind of like little tweaks that would make it even more powerful. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good idea.
And the last one is the consequences. So we do things for a benefit, but we also stop doing things if we aren't getting rewarded or getting punished for it, right? So we tend to think that, like, if we yell at them or be really mean when they're drinking, it's going to help. But as we said, that doesn't work. And that also could be frustrating because you're thinking, like, why isn't my anger or me being upset at their drinking, like, enough to make them stop?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it just doesn't. But what you could do is you really specifically withdraw that reinforcing behavior, that reward when they drink. So if you normally would like socialize and really connect and do something fun when the person's sober, just don't do it when they're drinking. And not in a spiteful, defensive way, like, oh, I see you're drunk, like, now we're not going to do that. Don't be mean about it. Just be really neutral, like, oh, okay, I see you're drinking. Okay, we'll do that fun thing another time. You take care of your dinner on your own. I'll see you later. Right? Just very like neutral. Take away the fun. You're smiling. What's your reaction to that?
I have a really stupid comment.
Yeah, go for it.
If any of you have cats, this is the only way to train cats.
Interesting.
They don't respond to punishment. All you can do is remove yourself as a reward.
Wow.
So yeah, cats, if you like smack them or yell at them, they'll just get confused and pissed. Like they'll scratch you or bite you because they're like, what are you doing to me? I don't get this. The only thing, like if they have a scratching or biting problem, the only thing you can do is remove yourself. And it takes a lot of patience, but it's the same principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not that different from animals. All these are animal training techniques, really. It's like behaviorism is really
Yeah.
This is how you would train a cat. So just
it's funny because normally we talk about training dogs, like Pavlov's dogs, but I think this is a cat specific
There we
example.
go.
You can
So
reward, but you cannot punish.
So cat people out there are going to be at an advantage because they're like, oh, I know this well. And then one more thing you can do is, so it's not good to punish the person, right? It just, I don't know, that just introduces a lot of negativity, doesn't really work. But what people what loved ones specifically tend to do is they tend to, we've talked about this before, but sometimes people in like a family member or loved one will inadvertently enable the drinking behavior, which usually means like kind of reinforcing a behavior that makes it more likely. So what we do with our loved ones is sometimes we clean up their mess, like kind of minimize the damage for them because we love them and we don't want to make things worse and and we want to be helpful. But actually that's not great for them in the long term. I'm totally, I'm really, really, guilty of this myself. But so when you're trying to add a consequence, you're really just letting natural consequences happen. You're just not cleaning up for them. You're not waking them up when they need to get up. You're not cleaning up literally anything for them. You're not paying for their bills or doing things that they otherwise would miss while drinking. Yeah. So I love, there's an example in the book of a former patient of theirs that a woman was waking up her husband on Saturday mornings because she knew that he loved going to their daughter's soccer games, but he was usually really drunk and then the next day would be really hungover and sleep in. So she'd wake him up and it'd get into a huge fight because it's like she's upset that he's sleeping in and he's like, you're being naggy and bossing, right? So she decided just to let him sleep in, to not wake him up anymore. And then he would miss the games. And he would get super upset, right? He would get really upset about himself. And she did it very neutrally, just like, I'm going to focus on spending more time to getting the girls ready for soccer. And, you can, if you wake up with us, that's great. But, I'm going to just take them to soccer, and telling the girls, oh, your father might join us later, but he's a little tired. I'm having trouble waking him up, but he loves you and he'll be there soon, So in the short term, it caused problems, but over the long term, he would learn to cut back on drinking so he could get up the next day in order to take them to the soccer games too.
I think that's a really important point, not only because it encourages drinking, because it says, if you drink, someone else will take care of the consequences for you. Yeah. But it also leads to the person who, let's just say alcoholics, like it leads to alcoholics being kind of losing their own agency and becoming dependent on another person. And I think usually when family members do this, it's because it's out of love and concern. I think sometimes my brother-in-law did this to my sister as a way to control her. So actually, if your family member stops doing this, it might really be a supportive gesture. Like, I believe in your agency. I don't want you to become controlled by your alcoholism and by other people. Like, you need to, I'm putting you back in charge of your own life, even if it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that agency is the most key point. If you listen to all of the strategies, it's not coercion, it's not, controlling the person and trying to get them to stop. It's like changing their environment and letting them choose, They could choose to do the alternative behavior or deal with the consequences. That's their choice, but you're just making it way harder to turn down the healthy behavior, right? So I thought those were great tips. I recommend this book to anyone.
Awesome. Well, I know we've talked a lot about the consequences of drinking and how hard it can be, but I did just want to add some, words of encouragement, because I think the month overall for me was really great. It was illuminating. I learned about myself. I also felt much better. The one ironic bit was that I wanted it to fix my sleeping, but the caveat is that I'm a super night owl, and alcohol actually put me to bed earlier, so I wound up being awake until 3 or 4 a.m. and then that screwed me up. So maybe just keep track of your sleep cycle, make sure that alcohol isn't what puts you to bed at night, because then that you might run into trouble there. But I really quickly lost weight, and it's always been harder for me in the past, and this shouldn't necessarily be about weight loss, but what it did was it made it much easier for me to eat healthy and eat well. Hangovers weren't pushing me towards greasy food anymore. I wasn't skipping workouts. And so there's an instant kind of lightness and euphoria that can come from not drinking. I actually remember going to Valentine's Day dinner, and that was the night I decided to drink. And I actually felt a kind of sense of clarity and euphoria, and I almost didn't want to take that drink. But I'm just so used to saying, oh yeah, alcohol will make me feel better, I'll like this, that I had it anyway. And I remember drinking and being like, ugh, yeah, actually I don't feel as well as I did before. I don't like this feeling as much. So there really are some benefits, and it can feel really great. And you can learn that you don't need to be dependent on alcohol to be charming. You can socialize, you can have fun, you can rely on yourself to relax yourself, or rely on healthier methods. So I would definitely recommend at least, the month-long experiment. And if you do drink a couple times, don't be like me and call it a failure, because it really isn't a failure. There were successes within that month, and overall, I'd say it was a success. So Kibby, once again, the title of that book, and then also an app that we recently learned about called I Am Sober. It connects you to a community of sober people. It allows you to track your drinking. You can track your data for cravings. You check in the morning and night. You can figure out, like, what is it that I was feeling that day that made me crave, that made me want to drink. So it can really, really help you learn things. There is also an AA app, Alcoholics Anonymous app, that can link to any meeting at any time. So you can join a meeting at midnight if you need to, which I think is an awesome tool. And then Kibby, one more time, the name of that book.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not being paid by this by this app. It's not a sponsorship, but it is a friend of our editor, Carly's, who used this and actually really benefited from it. So we get, this is anecdotal, firsthand experience that that app is really helpful. So again, the book is called Beyond Addiction: How Science and Kindness Help People Change by Dr. Jeffrey Foote, Dr. Carrie Wilkins, and Dr. Nicole Kosank, with Stephanie Higgs. I'll link the citation on our website so you can check out there.
Awesome. Well, if any of you crazy cats sober up long enough to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would greatly appreciate it. Rate, review, and subscribe. And we will see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.